Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. They thought Earth was defenseless until the warriors arrived. The skies above Velos burned amber as the Drakari ships descended through the cloud layer, their hulls gleaming with a dull metallic sheen that absorbed rather than reflected light. The native Velosians, with their four-limbed bodies and crystalline skin structures, gazed upward in confusion rather than fear. They had no concept of invasion. Their civilization had known millennia of peace. General Thornton of the Drakari Imperial Fleet watched from the command deck of his flagship, the inevitable Conquest. His scaled fingers tapped against the polished obsidian of his command console, while his secondary eyes scanned tactical readouts. "Resistance?" he inquired, though he already knew the answer. "None, General," replied Commander Vorsh, his aide. "Their planetary defense grid consists of weather monitoring stations. They have no warships, no orbital weapons platforms." Thornton's mouth curled into what passed for a smile among his species. "Perfect, begin the harvest." The first plasma bombardment struck the Velosian capital city of Luminara without warning. Ancient crystal spires, architectural marvels that had stood for thousands of years, shattered under the onslaught. The screams of the dying echoed through communication channels as the Drakari landing craft followed, disgorging ground troops that moved with mechanical precision. The Velosians had no warriors, only scholars and artisans. The slaughter was methodical. Far beyond the Velo system, on the edge of what the galactic community considered civilized space, a human deep space monitoring station designated Sentinel-9 picked up the distress signals. Lieutenant Decker Holloway removed his headset slowly, his face ashen. For 6 months, he'd monitored this sector from the cramped confines of Sentinel-9, listening to the stars. Most days brought nothing but cosmic background radiation and the occasional merchant vessel transmission. "Today brought genocide. Command needs to hear this," he told his station partner, Specialist Priya Narayan. Her dark eyes met his, understanding immediately. "The Galactic Council won't intervene," she said quietly. "Velos isn't a member world." "Then what's the point of having a council?" Decker slammed his palm against the console. "These people are being slaughtered." 12 hours later, the transmission reached Earth Defense Command headquarters in Geneva. Admiral Elena Reeves listened to the recording, her weathered face betraying no emotion. Around the briefing table sat the highest-ranking military officials humanity had to offer. "The Drakari Empire," General Tomas Akafer said, breaking the silence that followed the recording. "They've been expanding aggressively for decades, harvesting resources, subjugating populations." "And the Council?" Admiral Reeves asked. The usual response: "They've issued a formal condemnation." The contempt in Akafer's voice was unmistakable. The Drakari are too powerful for them to challenge directly. Colonel Fiona Reinhardt leaned forward, her red hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized her sharp features. "What about us? Are we going to do something or just send our thoughts and prayers?" A ripple of discomfort passed through the room. Earth wasn't a military power, not by galactic standards. Humanity had only achieved faster-than-light travel 80 years ago. Their ships were considered primitive, their weapons ineffective against the shielding technology of advanced species like the Drakari. "The Velosians helped us," said Professor Harrison Wells, the civilian xenobiologist who had been invited to the briefing. "When that plague hit our colonies in the Procyon system, they freely shared their medical knowledge. Thousands of lives were saved." Admiral Reeves nodded. "I'm aware of our debt, Professor. But this is the Drakari Empire we're talking about. They have energy weapons that could vaporize our best ships before we got within firing range." "Perhaps," said a new voice. All heads turned toward Commander Nikolai Petrov, the tactical specialist who rarely spoke in these meetings. "But they've never fought humans before." The room fell silent. "Explain," Reeves ordered. Petrov stood, activating the holographic display at the center of the table. It showed Drakari ship schematics, information purchased at great cost from black market information brokers. "The Drakari rely on overwhelming force and advanced technology. Their tactics are predictable, formulaic. They've dominated so thoroughly for so long that they've forgotten how to adapt." He manipulated the display, highlighting specific parts of the Drakari vessels. "And they have weaknesses." "Even if that's true," General Akafer countered, "we can't match their firepower." "No," Colonel Reinhardt said, a dangerous smile forming on her lips. "But we can be where they don't expect us, hit what they don't protect, and disappear before they can respond." Admiral Reeves studied the determined faces around her. Earth's military doctrine had always been defensive: protect the homeworld, secure the colonies. What Reinhardt was suggesting would be the first offensive operation in space that humanity had ever undertaken. The Council would condemn us, she said quietly. With respect, Admiral, Reinhardt replied, the Council isn't helping the Velosians, and they won't help us if the Drakari ever turn their eyes toward Earth. Reeves took a long breath. What exactly are you proposing, Colonel? Give me the 7th Special Operations Division. Let us show the Drakari that Earth isn't just another primitive world for them to harvest. For 3 tense days, the command staff debated. Outside their secure conference room, life on Earth continued as normal. Citizens went about their business, unaware that their military leaders were contemplating an action that might forever change humanity's place in the galaxy. On Velos, the slaughter continued. The Drakari methodically processed the planet's resources, setting up massive extraction facilities while the surviving Velosians were herded into labor camps. General Thornton toured one such facility, satisfaction evident in his posture. The Velosian crystals, both the architectural ones and those harvested from the bodies of the natives, were proving even more energy conductive than initial scans had suggested. Production is already at 70% capacity, Commander Vorsch reported. We're ahead of schedule. Excellent, Thornton replied. The Emperor will be pleased. Perhaps he'll finally grant me that governorship on. An alarm cut through his words. Red emergency lighting bathed the facility's interior. What's happening? Thornton demanded. Unknown vessels approaching, Vorsch replied, checking his communication device. They appeared out of nowhere. Our outer perimeter sensors didn't detect them until they were already past the orbital defense grid. Thornton's primary eyes narrowed. Pirates, mercenaries who would dare. In the blackness of space above Velos, 7 ships of Earth design dropped their stealth fields. They were sleek, matte black vessels that resembled predatory sea creatures from ancient Earth oceans. Their hulls bore no insignia, no identifying marks of any kind. On the bridge of the lead ship, the Phantom, Colonel Fiona Reinhardt stood with her hands clasped behind her back, studying the tactical display. We're being scanned, reported Lieutenant Commander Jackson Hayes, her executive officer. Drakari patrol vessels moving to intercept. Let them come, Reinhardt said calmly, weapons status. Rail guns charged, missile tubes loaded, point defense systems online. And our special package. Hayes smiled, ready for delivery, Colonel. Begin the operation, Reinhardt ordered. Remember, we're not here to win a conventional battle. We're here to teach the Drakari that some species bite back. The Earth vessels accelerated toward the Drakari patrol ships, seemingly on a suicidal intercept course. The enemy vessels, 3 times the size of the human ships, moved to engage, confident in their superior technology. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. The Earth ships didn't behave like warships were supposed to. They moved like fighter craft, executing maneuvers that strained their structural integrity to the breaking point. They fired weapons that, while primitively kinetic rather than energy-based, struck with devastating precision at the exact junction points in Drakari shielding grids. And they deployed something the Drakari had never seen before, nanoscale disruptor drones that attached to enemy hulls and burrowed through, seeking out critical systems. Within minutes, 2 Drakari patrol ships were dead in space. A third was venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches. In the Drakari command center on Velos, General Thornton watched in disbelief as the tactical display showed his orbital forces being systematically dismantled by vessels that, according to all intelligence, shouldn't have posed any threat at all. Who are they? He snarled. A communications officer looked up, his facial scales pale with shock. We're receiving a transmission. On the main screen, Colonel Fiona Reinhardt's face appeared. Her expression was calm, almost serene. This is Colonel Fiona Reinhardt of Earth, she said. You have committed atrocities against the people of Velos, a peaceful civilization that posed no threat to you. We are here to inform you that such actions have consequences. Thornton's facial ridges flared with rage. Earth, that primitive backwater, you dare challenge the Drakari Empire. Reinhardt's smile never reached her eyes. We're not just challenging you, General, we're serving notice. The defenseless of this galaxy are no longer alone. The transmission cut off. Moments later, alarms blared throughout the facility as Earth dropships pierced the atmosphere, heading directly for the largest Drakari extraction centers. The invasion of Velos had begun as a simple harvest operation for the Drakari Empire. It was about to become something else entirely, the first battleground in humanity's emergence as a force in galactic affairs. And as Colonel Reinhardt led her troops into the heart of the enemy's operations, one thought dominated her mind. The Drakari had never faced humans in combat before. They had no idea what was coming. The Drakari command center erupted into chaos as proximity alarms screamed from every console. General Thornton's secondary eyes flicked rapidly between tactical displays, while his primary gaze remained fixed on the main view screen showing Earth vessels executing maneuvers his military advisors had deemed physically impossible. "How are they penetrating our defensive grid?" he roared, slamming a scaled fist onto his command podium. "Where are our interceptors?" Commander Vorsh frantically coordinated the response, his usual composure shattered. "The human ships are using some form of localized jamming technology. Our targeting systems can't lock on, and they're exploiting gaps in our sensor coverage that shouldn't exist." Outside, the Black Earth dropships screamed through Velos's amber skis, their hulls briefly glowing red from atmospheric entry. Unlike the massive, imposing Drakari troop carriers, these vessels were small, agile, and nearly invisible to conventional sensors. Each carried just 12 soldiers, but not ordinary soldiers. Colonel Reinhardt stood braced in the lead dropship, checking her tactical gear one final time. Her battle armor was lightweight compared to the bulky exoskeletons favored by most galactic militaries, prioritizing mobility and stealth over raw protection. The synthetic muscle fibers woven throughout would amplify her strength, while the integrated medical systems could keep her fighting through injuries that would incapacitate an unaugmented human. "2 minutes to touchdown," announced the pilot, a woman named Lieutenant Brielle Hammond, whose skill at atmospheric insertion was legendary within the 7th Division. Reinhardt nodded and addressed her team over the tactical network. "Remember your training. The Drakari have never fought humans before. They don't know what we're capable of. Strike fast, strike hard, and disappear before they can respond. Priority targets are their communication hubs and command structures." The soldiers around her, hand-picked veterans from Earth's most elite special forces units, acknowledged with silent nods. Many had fought in the resource wars on Mars or the colonial insurrections of the outer planets. They were used to being outnumbered and outgunned. The dropship suddenly lurched sideways as Lieutenant Hammond executed an evasive maneuver. "Drakari air defenses finally waking up," she reported calmly, deploying countermeasures. Outside, clouds of microscopic reflective particles billowed from the dropship's defensive systems, confusing enemy targeting arrays while stealth systems redirected sensor pings toward false positives. It was old technology by galactic standards, simple electromagnetic distortion rather than the advanced quantum stealth used by more developed species. But it was being employed with a creativity that threw the rigid Drakari defense protocols into disarray. The dropship touched down hard in a clearing adjacent to the largest Drakari extraction facility. Before the dust had settled, the assault ramp slammed down, and Reinhardt's team flowed out like predators released from a cage, fast, silent, and deadly. "Spread out, establish perimeter," Sergeant Wallace Bishop directed, his massive frame belying his graceful movement. A former zero-gravity construction worker from the asteroid belts, Bishop had joined Earth's military after pirates killed his family. His knowledge of structural engineering made him exceptional at identifying critical weaknesses in enemy installations. The team moved through the alien forest surrounding the facility, their adaptive camouflage blending seamlessly with the phosphorescent flora of Velos. Ahead loomed the extraction plant, a grotesque industrial complex that stood in stark contrast to the organic architecture of the Velosian settlements it had replaced. Enormous machinery pulsed with energy as it processed the crystalline remains of buildings, and more horrifically, Velosian bodies for their energy-conductive properties. Reinhardt accessed the tactical overlay through her neural interface. The other teams were reporting successful landings at their designated targets around the planet. Operation Thunderbolt was proceeding as planned so far. "Strike Team Alpha approaching primary objective," she subvocalized, the words transmitted to the Phantom in orbit. "Facility appears to be operating at peak capacity. Heavy guard presence detected." Lieutenant Commander Hayes responded from the ship. "Understood, Colonel. Orbital scans show approximately 80 Drakari soldiers plus automated defense systems. Support personnel number in the hundreds." Reinhardt signaled her team to halt as they reached the edge of the defensive perimeter. The Drakari had established a standard security cordon, motion sensors, automated turrets, and regular patrol patterns. Standard, predictable, inflexible. "Bishop Daniels' point of entry?" she asked. Technical specialist Olivia Daniels, the team's electronic warfare expert, consulted her wrist-mounted scanner. "Their power distribution system has a vulnerability on the northwestern side. They're routing too much energy through a secondary conduit, probably had to improvise as they rushed to set up the facility." Bishop nodded in agreement. That section of the outer wall also shows signs of hasty construction. Their architectural patterns prioritize symmetry over structural integrity. Perfect, we breach there, Reinhardt decided. She turned to the team's infiltration specialist. Lieutenant Wu, you're up. Ian Wu, a second-generation lunar colonist whose ancestors had been among China's first space miners, moved forward with fluid grace. His specially modified armor contained additional stealth enhancements and sensor-dampening technology. "Give me 3 minutes," he said, then vanished into the darkness. Inside the Drakari facility, General Thornton was receiving increasingly desperate reports from his orbital defense fleet. "The human vessels are targeting our communication relays," a tactical officer reported. "3 more ships have been disabled. They're avoiding killing shots, deliberately crippling rather than destroying." Thornton hissed in frustration. "They're toying with us. Deploy the reserve fleet from the far side of the moon." "Sir," Commander Vorsch interjected, "perhaps we should contact Imperial Command for reinforcements. These humans are employing tactics we haven't encountered before." "And admit that a primitive species is challenging us," Thornton snarled. "The Emperor would have my head. No, we will crush these insects ourselves." An alarm suddenly blared from a different console. "Perimeter breach detected in Section 9, shouted a security officer. "Multiple intrusion points." Lieutenant Wu had disabled the northwestern sensor grid by introducing a cascading failure in the power distribution system, exactly as Daniels had suggested. The facility's automated defenses flickered momentarily as backup systems engaged, creating a 3-second window for Strike Team Alpha to breach the perimeter. 3 seconds was all they needed. The team moved like shadows through the gap, each member knowing their role without needing verbal commands. They trained for months in simulated environments based on intelligence gathered by Earth's covert operatives. Every Drakari patrol pattern, every security protocol, every potential response had been anticipated and countered. Inside the facility's outer ring, they encountered their first Drakari soldiers, 8-foot-tall reptilian warriors encased in powered armor that amplified their already formidable strength. In open combat, a single Drakari could overpower several humans through sheer physical might. But this wasn't open combat. Sergeant Bishop fired first, not with a conventional weapon, but with a specialized disruptor that targeted the neural interfaces of the Drakari battle armor. The massive warriors suddenly found themselves trapped in powered exoskeletons that no longer responded to their commands. Before they could raise an alarm, Reinhardt and Lieutenant Jesse Hidalgo, the team's close-quarters combat specialist, moved in. Their vibroblades, oscillating at frequencies that allowed them to slice through most known armors, found the gaps in the Drakari protection. Quick, clean, silent. "Move," Reinhardt ordered, leading the team deeper into the facility. They encountered more resistance as they approached the central processing hub, the heart of the extraction operation. Here, enormous machines converted Velosian crystal into energy cells for Drakari weapons and ships. The air hummed with power, and the stench of ozone mixed with something organic and disturbing. Daniels accessed a terminal, her fingers flying across the alien interface. "Colonel, I'm accessing their security grid. I can give us a temporary lockdown of the interior sections, trap most of the guards away from the central hub." "Do it," Reinhardt confirmed. "How long?" 2 minutes, maybe 3 before their systems adapt." It would be enough. The team pushed forward as security doors slammed shut throughout the facility, isolating Drakari response teams from each other and from the command center. Alarms wailed, adding to the confusion. They reached the central hub, a cavernous chamber dominated by crystalline processing arrays. Velosian minerals glowed with disturbing intensity as they were systematically destroyed to extract their energy potential. And supervising it all was a Drakari officer whose elaborate armor marked him as a facility administrator. "Intruders," he bellowed, reaching for his weapon. Lieutenant Hidalgo's shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Bishop and Wu secured the remaining technicians while Daniels headed straight for the main control console. "Facility secure," Reinhardt reported, beginning Phase 2. Outside, across the planet, similar scenes were playing out as Earth strike teams systematically targeted and captured key Drakari installations. Not through overwhelming force, but through precision, speed, and the adaptive tactics that bureaucratic military structures like the Drakaris couldn't counter effectively. In orbit, Lieutenant Commander Hayes watched as the carefully orchestrated assault unfolded. The Phantom and its sister ships continued their hit-and-run attacks on Drakari orbital assets, preventing them from providing support to their ground forces. Colonel Hayes communicated to Reinhardt, "Drakari reinforcements detected approaching from the moon base." ETA 12 minutes. Understood, Reinhardt replied, watching as Daniels worked on the facilities systems. Status on the package. Ready when you are. In the central hub, Daniels looked up from the console. I've gained administrator access to their network. I can trigger a system-wide shutdown of all extraction operations planet-wide. Do it, Reinhardt ordered, and prepare for the upload. As the massive machinery ground to a halt around them, the team activated the next phase of the operation. From compartments in their armor, they removed what appeared to be small crystalline objects, seemingly insignificant but containing Earth's most advanced artificial intelligence warfare system. Prometheus deploying, Daniels confirmed as she inserted the crystal into the Drakari network interface. Within seconds, the sophisticated virtual intelligence began spreading through the Drakari systems, gathering intelligence, mapping their communication networks, and seeding itself into their command protocols. Unlike crude computer viruses, Prometheus could adapt to countermeasures, hiding dormant fragments of itself throughout enemy systems. Upload complete, Daniels reported. Prometheus is now embedded in their network. It will transmit everything they do back to Earth intelligence for the next 6 months before they have any hope of detecting it. Reinhardt nodded with satisfaction. The intelligence gathered would be invaluable for Earth's defense planning, but that wasn't the primary objective of today's mission. Prepare the broadcast, she ordered. Throughout the facility, display screens flickered as Prometheus overrode their programming. The same was happening in Drakari installations across Velos and on their orbiting vessels. Every Drakari soldier, technician, and officer was about to receive the same message. Reinhardt stood before a capture device, removed her helmet, and stared directly into it. Her expression was not one of triumph or anger, but of cold determination. This message is for General Thornton, the Drakari Imperial Command, and any species that believes they can prey upon the defenseless without consequences, she began. I am Colonel Fiona Reinhardt of Earth. Today we have demonstrated that your technological advantages do not make you invincible. Your extraction operations on Velos have been neutralized. Your communication systems are compromised. Your orbital defenses have been rendered ineffective. She leaned closer to the capture device, her voice lowering to an almost intimate tone. This is not a declaration of war. It is a warning. Earth now stands with those you would victimize. We are implementing immediate evacuation of surviving Velosians to protective custody. Any attempt to interfere will be met with the full measure of our response. In the Drakari Command Center, General Thornton watched in impotent rage as the human colonel's face appeared on every screen. His carefully planned harvest operation was collapsing around him, undermined by a species his intelligence briefings had dismissed as barely space-capable. We will withdraw from Velos once the evacuation is complete, Reinhardt continued. But know this, Earth is watching. We will continue to watch. And should you or any other predatory power target innocent species again, we will respond, not with declarations or diplomatic protests, but with action. The transmission cut off, leaving Thornton staring at blank screens and the realization that everything had changed. The galaxy's power dynamics had just shifted in ways the Drakari Empire was not prepared for. As Earth dropships began landing in Velosian settlements to evacuate survivors, Colonel Reinhardt led her team back to their extraction point. Their part of the mission was complete. Now it was time for the humanitarian phase to begin, showing the galaxy that humans didn't just fight effectively, they also protected those who couldn't protect themselves. The storm from the shadows had broken the Drakari's grip on Velos, but as Reinhardt knew all too well, this was just the beginning of a much larger conflict. Earth had announced its presence on the galactic stage not as a diplomatic partner or a technological innovator, but as something far more unexpected and disruptive, a defender of the defenseless, willing to challenge even the most powerful empires. And somewhere in the dark spaces between stars, other powers were taking notice. The morning light on Velos cast long shadows through the shattered remains of what had once been the Grand Archive, the repository of Velosian knowledge and art for over 30,000 years. Now its crystal spires lay broken, its contents scattered across the amber plains surrounding the capital. Colonel Reinhardt stood amid the destruction, her armor dusty and battle-worn after 3 days of continuous operations. Beautiful, isn't it? Reinhardt turned to find a Velosian elder approaching her. Unlike humans, Velosians didn't age by wrinkling or graying. Instead, their crystalline skin structures became more complex, more faceted, refracting light in mesmerizing patterns. This elder, who had introduced herself as Luminara, glittered with the wisdom of centuries. The destruction? Reinhardt asked, confused by the comment. No, Luminara replied, her voice musical yet tinged with sorrow. The sunrise, even after everything, it still comes. Our ancestors believed that no darkness could prevent the light's return. Reinhardt nodded, understanding the sentiment if not the cultural context behind it. We've secured the northern continent. The Drakari have retreated to their southern fortifications, but they're regrouping. And yet you stay, Luminara observed. Many feared you would strike and leave, as others have done before when challenging the great powers. The colonel's communications device chimed before she could respond. Reinhardt, she answered. Lieutenant Commander Hayes' voice came through, tense and urgent. Colonel, we've got movement. The Drakari Reserve Fleet has broken orbit from their moon base, 16 warships heading to reinforce their southern position. And something else. Long-range sensors detect a larger force entering the system. Signature matches Drakari Imperial dreadnoughts. Reinhardt's expression hardened. How many? 3 with escort vessels, estimated arrival 14 hours. She ended the communication and turned back to Luminara. We're not leaving, but the situation has become more complicated. Your people, those we've evacuated to the northern shelters, they need to be moved to our transports immediately. You fear these new ships, Luminara stated, not questioning. Respect their capabilities, Reinhardt corrected. 1 Imperial dreadnought carries enough firepower to glass half this continent. 3 could render the entire planet uninhabitable. Luminara's crystalline features shifted in what Reinhardt had learned was an expression of determination. Then we shall assist with the evacuation. But Colonel, what of your forces? Even my limited understanding of warfare suggests you are vastly outnumbered. Reinhardt allowed herself a small smile. Wouldn't be the first time. Back at the forward command post, established in a repurposed Drakari communications hub, Earth's forces prepared for the coming storm. What had begun as a surgical strike operation had evolved into something far more complex, a planetary defense against overwhelming odds. Major Indra Patel, Earth's foremost expert on xenopsychology and the newly appointed liaison to the Velosian survivors, confronted Reinhardt as she entered the command center. Colonel, the evacuation transports can only accommodate 15,000 Velosians. There are over 60,000 survivors in our protective zones. Reinhardt moved to the central holographic display, studying the tactical situation. Then we prioritize children, medical cases, and those with specialized knowledge. The rest will need to shelter in place until we can arrange additional transports. If the Drakari unleash orbital bombardment before then, Patel pressed. Then we make sure it's the last thing they ever do, interjected Sergeant Bishop, who was checking the power core on his heavy weapons system. Reinhardt shot him a warning glance but didn't contradict him. Instead, she addressed the assembled command staff. The Phantom and our other vessels are implementing Plan Chimera. The Drakari believe they have us cornered, let's use that. Technical specialist Daniels brought up the detailed tactical overlay. Prometheus has given us complete access to their communication protocols. We can feed them false intelligence, disrupt their coordination. And our ground forces? Lieutenant Wu asked, his usually calm demeanor showing signs of strain after days of infiltration missions behind enemy lines. We're implementing distributed defense, Reinhardt explained. Small, mobile units employing hit-and-run tactics against their supply lines and communication hubs. The Drakari fight like a hammer, direct, powerful, but inflexible, will be the wind everywhere and nowhere. As the command staff dispersed to implement the new strategy, Lieutenant Hidalgo lingered behind. Once they were alone, she spoke with the frankness that only a longtime friend could manage. Fiona, this isn't like Titan or Europa. We can't hold against Imperial dreadnoughts with what we have. Reinhardt sighed, momentarily allowing her commander's mask to slip. I know, but we need to buy time for the evacuation and for the package to arrive. Hidalgo's eyes widened. The council actually approved it. Not exactly, Reinhardt replied with a grim smile. Let's just say Admiral Reeves made an executive decision, ETA 16 hours if we can hold that long. On the southern continent, General Thornton had established his new command center within the massive fortress of a secondary extraction facility. His mood was dark, his pride wounded by the humans' effective strikes against his forces. But now, with Imperial reinforcements approaching, he prepared to crush this irritating resistance once and for all. Status report, he demanded of his reinstated second-in-command, Commander Vorsch. Our ground forces have consolidated at defensive positions Alpha through Delta, Vorsch reported. The humans continue to harass our supply convoys and communications outposts, but they lack the numbers for a direct assault. Our reserve fleet has established orbital superiority over the southern hemisphere. And the natives, the Velosians. The humans are evacuating them from the northern continent. Our long-range sensors detect 7 transport vessels loading with refugees. Thornton's facial ridges expanded in what passed for satisfaction among his species. Perfect. Once the Imperial dreadnoughts arrive, we'll destroy those transports as they attempt to leave the atmosphere. Let the humans watch their precious refugees burn. Sir, Vorsh ventured cautiously, perhaps we should consider opening communications with the Earth forces. Their tactical capabilities have proven unexpected. The Emperor might prefer negotiation to prolonged conflict over a single harvest world. Thornton whirled on his subordinate, rage evident in his posture. Negotiate with primitives. The humans caught us by surprise once, it will not happen again. When the dreadnoughts arrive, we will obliterate them so thoroughly that no species in the galaxy will dare interfere with Drakari operations ever again. As night fell across Velos, the conflict entered a new phase. Earth's forces, dispersed into small, mobile teams, began a coordinated series of strikes against Drakari positions. Unlike the initial assault, these weren't aimed at capturing territory, but at creating maximum disruption with minimal resources. Lieutenant Wu led a six-person team through the underground crystal caverns that networked much of the southern continent. The Velosian guide accompanying them, a young female named Tessera, moved with surprising speed through the narrow passages. The Drakari never bothered to map these networks, she explained as they emerged behind enemy lines. My people used them for meditation and communion with our world. Now they will serve another purpose. Wu's team planted quantum disruption devices at key points beneath Drakari sensor arrays and communication hubs. Once activated, these devices would create localized distortions in electromagnetic fields, rendering the Drakari's advanced targeting systems useless without leaving any physical evidence of tampering. Across the continent, 24 similar teams executed precision strikes, not to kill, but to blind, confuse, and disorient the enemy. It was asymmetric warfare at its most refined, the kind of fighting humans had perfected over centuries of conflict against themselves before turning it outward to the stars. In orbit, the situation was more dire. The Phantom and its sister ships were grossly outmatched by the Drakari Reserve Fleet. Lieutenant Commander Hayes had dispersed his vessels in an irregular pattern, using Velos's 2 moons and dense asteroid belt for cover, engaging only when they could strike from unexpected vectors. Phantom to all vessels, Hayes communicated. Imperial dreadnoughts have crossed the system's edge, 11 hours to weapons range, implement Phase 2 of Plan Chimera. On the bridge of the Phantom, Navigation Officer Rachel Ortiz looked up from her console. Sir, Phase 2 puts our ships at extreme risk. If we deploy our stealth drones to mimic our signature patterns, we'll have nothing in reserve if they see through the deception. Noted, Lieutenant, Hayes replied calmly. But Colonel Reinhardt needs those 11 hours, and this is how we give them to her. Deploy the drones as planned. As the Earth vessels released hundreds of small, unmanned craft programmed to mimic their energy signatures, the Drakari fleet prepared to engage what they thought were the main human forces. The deception would buy precious time, but at a cost. Earth's actual ships would need to power down to minimal life support, drifting silent and cold to avoid detection, vulnerable should the ruse be discovered. Dawn broke over the northern evacuation zone as the first transport ships, loaded with Velosian refugees, prepared for departure. Colonel Reinhardt supervised the operation personally, watching as families were processed through makeshift screening centers established to prevent overcrowding. We're prioritizing as you ordered, Major Patel reported. Children, medical cases, those with specialized knowledge, but Colonel, they're separating families to do it. Parents are refusing to board without their children and vice versa. Reinhardt watched as a Velosian child, no more than the equivalent of 6 Earth years, clung to an adult whose crystalline skin reflected similar patterns, a parent or close relative. The adult was gently trying to guide the child toward the transport while remaining behind. New protocol, Reinhardt decided immediately. Family units remain intact. Adjust capacity calculations accordingly. That will reduce our evacuation numbers by almost 30%, Patel warned. I know, but we're not just preserving bodies, Major. We're preserving a civilization. She paused, watching the Velosian family embrace. Some things matter more than tactical efficiency. The moment of reflection was shattered by an urgent communication from Lieutenant Wu. Colonel, we've completed our sabotage operation, but we've encountered something unexpected. The Drakari aren't just harvesting Velosian crystal, they're experimenting on Velosian prisoners. Some kind of biological research facility hidden beneath their main southern fortress. Reinhardt's blood ran cold. The Drakari were known for resource extraction and territorial expansion, not biological weapons research. What kind of experiments? Unknown, Wu replied, his voice tight with controlled anger. But whatever it is, they're accelerating the work now that they know we're evacuating survivors. Should we attempt liberation of the prisoners? It was an impossible choice. Diverting resources to a rescue operation would endanger the main evacuation and defensive strategy. Not acting would condemn those Velosians to whatever horrific fate the Drakari had planned. Hold position, Reinhardt ordered after a moment's consideration. Document everything you can. I need visual evidence before I make a decision. The transmission Wu sent minutes later made the decision for her. The images showed Velosian prisoners connected to machines that systematically extracted not just the external crystalline structures that defined their species, but something deeper, cellular components that contained their genetic memory, the biological repository of their entire civilization's knowledge. They're not just harvesting resources, Daniels breathed, examining the data. They're extracting the Velosians' collective memory, their entire cultural identity. Reinhardt's expression hardened. Major Patel, continue the evacuation. Lieutenant Hidalgo, assemble a strike force. We're hitting that research facility. Colonel Hidalgo cautioned, that's in the heart of their defensive perimeter. The Imperial dreadnoughts will be in weapons range in less than 10 hours. Then we'd better move quickly, Reinhardt replied. Because if what they're extracting is what I think it is, the Drakari aren't just committing genocide, they're stealing the soul of an entire species. As her team prepared for what might be a suicide mission, Colonel Reinhardt recorded a message to be transmitted to Earth should the operation fail. In it, she detailed everything they had discovered about the Drakari's true intentions on Velos and their experimental program. Admiral Reeves, she concluded, if we don't return, know that what's happening here goes beyond simple resource extraction. The Drakari aren't just taking this world, they're harvesting something far more valuable from its people. Whatever happens, Earth cannot allow this to continue elsewhere. The galaxy must know the truth. She ended the recording and donned her battle armor once more. Outside the command post, Luminara waited with a small contingent of Velosian volunteers. My people wish to join your rescue mission, the elder stated simply. Reinhardt started to refuse, then reconsidered. This isn't your fight anymore, you should be on those transports. You misunderstand, Colonel, Luminara replied, her crystalline form catching the light of Velos's rising second sun. It has always been our fight. We simply lack the means to wage it effectively. You have given us that means, now allow us to use it. Around them, the last civilians were boarding the transports. In orbit, Earth's vessels maintained their desperate deception against the approaching Drakari armada. And beneath the southern fortress, imprisoned Velosians waited unknowingly for either rescue or oblivion. The heart of the battle for Velos was no longer about territory or even survival. It had become something far more profound, a struggle for the very essence of a civilization, and perhaps a turning point in how the galaxy's powers viewed humanity. As Reinhardt led her mixed force of human soldiers and Velosian volunteers toward the enemy stronghold, she couldn't help but wonder, had Earth just stumbled into something much larger than a rescue mission for a single world? And were they truly ready for the consequences that would follow? The answer would soon be written in blood, crystal, and starfare.